Hello and welcome to the Get Real Football Experts podcast, finishing up the AFC North of the schedule rundown edition. I'm your host, Louie, DiBi at DiBi Sports Talk. Check me out on Twitter. And I'm going to finish it up with the Baltimore Ravens. Dave did the Bengals and Browns, and I had the Pittsburgh Steelers. You can check those out at youtube.com/NFL Experts. This will be the last video being posted by myself, as I'm going away for a week, so we're going to take a break here on the Get Real Football Experts podcast for a little bit. Tight ends of the fantasy video will be up in a couple days, and as well as the first edition of the Wheel of Experts game show on our YouTube page. So let's get this started. The Baltimore Ravens, obviously the defending Super Bowl champions, beating the San Francisco 49ers in the Super Bowl. Ray Lewis's last ride, his last ever season, he goes out on the Super Bowl. Ed Reed leaving a lot of changes with this Ravens team. Ed Reed is now gone. He's now in Houston. They lost Paul Kruger to the Cleveland Browns. They lost N.L. Ellerbe to the Miami Dolphins. I mean, you name it. Rolando McClain, their pickup ended up not panning out as he got arrested and then retired. So, and then Anquan Boldin being shipped over to the 49ers, trying to save cap space to keep Ellerbe and obviously sign that monster deal that Joe Flacco did after coming off a Super Bowl MVP type season, and he was spectacular in the playoffs. It was not all Ray Lewis. When you have 11 touchdowns and 0 interceptions in the playoffs, that's pretty impressive. So, I mean, the Ravens but not only did they lose a lot of people, they really gained a lot. Arthur Brown's going to come in replacing Ray Lewis. He is the second-round pick coming out of Kansas State, a really good middle linebacker, athletic. That's going to go nicely to Kevin McClain, who I think are two pretty solid linebackers. And then to replace Ed Reed, they got Marcus Huff, the Oakland Raiders' former starting safety, who was very solid and underrated in Oakland. You also got Ellis Dumerville, which I think is definitely an upgrade over Paul Kruger to go opposite of Terrell Suggs coming over from Denver. Had 11.5 sacks last season, so a very impressive year last year for the veteran. The corners position, they also lost Kerry Williams to the Philadelphia Eagles, but they didn't really need him because Ladarius Webb is coming off of season-ending injury. He'll be healthy. And then first-round pick of 2012, Jimmy Smith had look at what he did in the Super Bowl against Crabtree in that last play to win the game. I think they are expecting him to come in pretty well, and so is Corey Graham, their other corner, who was really good in the playoffs. Had a couple interceptions, especially against the Denver Broncos. I think he really showed his potential. Then you go to the offensive side. The only player they really didn't replace is the guy that I think was the most important in the playoffs last year, is Anquan Boldin. And they really have not. That's the one position I'm concerned about them, because they do have Torrey Smith and Jacoby Jones, but neither one's a really complete receiver. I expect Torrey Smith to come into his own this year, but honestly, I mean, he's a big, deep threat, and so is Jacoby Jones. I see Jacoby Jones as more of a special teams, kick returner type guy, but he's a pretty good number 3 receiver, but I just don't see him as a number 2, and they just have not done anything to replace him, and it's interesting to see what they'll do. Jim Harbaugh said he's in love with some of the free agents still available, so maybe they'll go after another receiver in free agency. Ray Rice and Bernard Pierce had a great 1-2 punch on the running backs, and the offensive line's pretty solid. And also in the defensive tackle spot, they added next to Haloti Ngata Chris Canty formerly of the New York Giants. So let's kick this off with all that hoopla about all the signings, but hey, it's very important stuff because this is a very different team coming off of a Super Bowl win. A lot of change for a team, that won it all. So let's kick it off with Week 1. They're not going to be home on their Super Bowl reign. Will not be celebrating in Baltimore. They're going away to the Mile High City in Denver against the Denver Broncos, a rematch of that incredible divisional playoff game against the Denver Broncos when the Ravens won in double overtime, which was incredible. So Jacoby Jones, obviously that amazing touchdown to tie the game in the end. I think the Ravens are going to lose this one though and drop to 0-1. I think the Broncos, they had put so many pieces in place around Peyton Manning, adding Wes Welker to go with an already really solid and really good receiving core with Demaryius Thomas and Eric Decker. Adding Wes Welker is just going to really help Peyton Manning, and also drafting Monty Ball I think is going to put some youth at the running back position. So in the defensive side, they got Dominic Rodgers-Cromartie from the Eagles, who's a pretty solid veteran cornerback that has a lot of speed and will really help that secondary. With Champ Bailey on the other side. Both teams have some new pieces in place, but I think I just think in Mile High they're looking to get back at the Ravens for that playoff loss last season. So I think the Broncos will win this game, and the Ravens will start off 0-1, moving into Week 2 where they're against the Cleveland Browns. So the Cleveland Browns are a team that have a lot of new pieces in place. They have a new head coach in Chuck Sudinsky, coming over from the Carolina Panthers. He was the offensive coordinator for Cam Newton. Now with Brandon Weeden and Trent Richardson, I think as long as Haloti Ngata and Chris Canty can stop Trent Richardson, I think that they will win this game and improve to 1-1. I mean, I just think the Ravens are just a much better team than the Browns, and as long as the chemistry can get down between all these new pieces, I think they'll be all right. Definitely against a Cleveland Browns team that I do not think is ready to compete yet with these really good teams, the AFC North. Week 3, they're home against the Houston Texans. The Texans and the Ravens have had some pretty good games as of late. Both going to compete for that AFC title. Matt Schwab, Arian Foster, Andre Johnson. I mean, these are guys that, and also J.J. Watt, the best defensive player, the reigning defensive player of the year. Brian Cushing's coming back from ACL tear, and I think that's going to be the difference here. I think the Ravens are going to lose this and drop to 1-2. I think the difference really is going to be Brian Cushing. Him versus Ray Rice is the key to this game. If they can really contain Ray Rice and force Joe Flacco to have to go to Torrey Smith against Jonathan Joseph and Ed Reed. Look for Ed Reed. Obviously, there's another key matchup is Ed Reed returning to the Baltimore Ravens, returning to Baltimore where he spent his entire career. Look for him to maybe pick off a Joe Flacco pass. That would be pretty cool to watch. I think Joe Flacco's going to be nervous. He had him in practice this year. He's been facing him in practice for many years, and I think it's going to be fun to see who gets the best of who in this matchup. And I think Ed Reed will, and the Texans will win. So going into Week 4, they're away in Ralph Wilson Stadium, Orchard Park, New York, against the Buffalo Bills. I think they're going to win this game and improve to 2-2. I will be at this game broadcasting. It's going to be interesting to see how the Bills really react to all these new defensive players with a young quarterback in E.J. Manuel. Granted, he's starting over Kevin Cobb. I think the key is Ellis Dumerville versus Cordy Glenn. Let's see if the veteran can really attack that young tackle and really just make, if him and Terrell Suggs can make E.J. Manuel uncomfortable, I think that they're going to easily win this game. I think Haloti Ngata will be able to stop C.J. Spiller, but I think the key is also Arthur Brown, watching him how he'll do against the run, because Spiller's an explosive back, and I know Arthur Brown has a little bit of speed of his own. If he can take him out, I think the Ravens will be all right. They're a much better team than the Buffalo Bills are, so they'll improve to 2-2. So going to Week 5, the Ravens are away against the Miami Dolphins. A lot of changes. They have Donnell Ellerbe from the Ravens, who had a spectacular playoff run at the linebacker position next to Ray Lewis, who honestly should have gotten most of the credit for the linebacking play. I think he was a much more better player influence on the field than Ray Lewis, not off, because there's no chance that he was, and Ray Lewis was also pretty solid. I think the Ravens are going to win this game against the Dolphins and improve to 3-2. If Terrell Suggs and Ellis Dumerville can attack Ryan Tannehill, I think the key here is going to be Ladarius Webb or Jimmy Smith versus Mike Wallace and his speed. If they can take him over the top and take away that deep threat, make Ryan Tannehill go to Brian Hartline and his other receivers, maybe Brandon Gibson, I think that the Ravens are going to win this game. They don't have enough weapons to me in order to keep up. So I think the Dolphins are definitely coming up to definitely compete with the Ravens. And it's tough. It's in Miami, but I think they'll win this game and improve to 3-2. So going to Week 6, they're home against the Green Bay Packers with probably the best quarterback in the league in Aaron Rodgers. I think they're going to lose this game based on the quarterback play. I think the defense for the Packers did struggle last year, but I think Clay Matthews is going to come in and be a wrecking force, just like he mostly is. I think that the Ravens will drop to 3-3 here. I think if the Ravens can take out, the Packers have so many weapons with Randall Cobb, Jordy Nelson, and James Jones. I just don't think the Ravens have the best secondary play to take them out. I think Matt Elam, the first-round pick of the safety next to Marcus Huff, is going to be interesting to see how he handles Randall Cobb in the slot if he wants to go down the slot, because I know Elam's a very good press coverage safety even. So I think that the Packers are going to have just too much offensive talent in order, and I don't think the Ravens will be able to keep up with their receivers, and I think they'll drop to 3-3. Heading into Week 7 before the bye week, they're away against the Pittsburgh Steelers, arguably the best rivalry in the NFL at Heinz Field. I think they're going to pull away a huge win. Yes, it's in Pittsburgh, which I'm sure I'll get a lot of hate for, that they're winning in Pittsburgh. But I think they're the better team here. Ben Roethlisberger, Le'Veon Bell, they lost Mike Wallace. They have Antonio Brown, Emmanuel Sanders at the receiving helm. But the defense, I think if Ray Rice is going to have to win some games for the Ravens with the loss of Bolden. And I think that he's going to be huge here. If he can get past Casey Hampton and Ryan Kriegel, I think that's going to be huge. And I think they'll do it. I think they'll win. It's going to be a defensive game like they always are. I'm sure Terrell Suggs will be talking before the game, and they will improve to 4-3 heading into the bye. So not a bad record, but certainly it's a tougher schedule than last year. And the Ravens are going to be much different, and they're going to have to grind it out in order to get a playoff spot again. So week 9, they're away against the Cleveland Browns. Again, I think they're going to sweep the Browns here and go to 5-3, but the Browns to give them a run for their money in Baltimore thanks to Trent Richardson last year. But I think that the Ravens will win. I think they got to get the easy wins if they're going to compete for the playoffs because they know they have a tough schedule and they need to get the wins against the teams that they should beat. And I think they'll do that here, improve to 5-3. Again, Arthur Brown versus Trent Richardson's the key. I think the Ravens have enough to take out Josh Gordon and Greg Little. I don't think that's really a threatening receiving course for the Ravens defense to worry about. So, and then again, it's going to be fun to watch Joe Hayden versus Torrey Smith and see how Joe Flacco utilizes his receivers. Also, probably get Dennis Pitta involved. Him versus DeQuell Jackson will be pretty interesting to watch. I think Dennis Pitta is going to be huge this year in the red zone with Anquan Boldin being gone. I think he's going to have a pretty big year. So, I think that now heading into Week 10, they're 5-3, home against the Cincinnati Bengals, and a lot of people are debating on debacling on who's going to win this division. It's pretty much people are saying between the Ravens, Bengals, and Steelers, obviously. But honestly, I think the Bengals might be the favorite, even though the Ravens are coming off a Super Bowl win. But I think the Ravens are going to come out with a big win at home. I think that they need to at least split with the Bengals if they want to compete. If they wanted to win the division, they'll improve to 6-3, so they'll get on a bit of a roll here on a 3-game win streak. Ladarius Love versus AJ Green is going to be huge because Andy Dalton relies on AJ Green a lot. And Giovanni Bernard and Benjarvis Green-Ellis are two pretty solid running backs, but again, we haven't seen any of Bernard yet. And Benjarvis Green-Ellis, I think we know what he is. He's a very solid running back, but I think that the key is just take out AJ Green. That defense is going to be very good. It's going to be a very low-scoring game. The Bengals have Geno Atkins, who's a menace. Get after Ray Rice and Joe Flacco. It's going to be a tough one, but I think the Ravens are going to eke it out based on better defensive play, in my opinion. So, Week 11, they're away against the Chicago Bears. Jay Cutler, Brandon Marshall, Matt Forte, a lot of weapons on that offense. But the defensive side is a bit different. Brian Urlacher retiring after he did not get a contract that he most likely liked as they were not willing to pay as much due to his age. I'm guessing just based on my observations of how the situation went down and what he said on the Rich Eisen podcast. Lance Briggs is still there though, and I think it's going to be really interesting to see what he did. I'm surprised they did not address the linebacker position in the draft. Instead, going all offensive line. It was all about Jay Cutler this year in the offseason, firing long-term head coach Lovie Smith and bringing in an offensive type coach in Mark Trestman, bringing in Jermaine Bushrod, a great tackle from the Saints, who's really going to protect Jay Cutler, and also getting a versatile guy in the first round like Kyle Long coming out of Oregon. He can play guard or tackle. And I think that the Ravens are going to lose this one. And I think the Bears are ready to make a solid run because of what they've done on the offensive side. And I think it's going to be actually a much higher scoring. It's always tough to play at Soldier Field. And I think the weather conditions here are going to be tough. I just think that the Bears are going to beat. These are two evenly matched teams, and I think that Charles Tillman versus Torrey Smith is going to be interesting to watch. I think you got to watch Lance Briggs versus Ray Rice. So, but I think that and also watch Matt Elam versus Martellus Bennett. That's gonna be fun to see the young guy go against a huge guy and a physical player that is Martellus Bennett, the tight end. They'll drop to 6-4 heading into Week 12, where they're home against the New York Jets. Look, I'm not probably going to have the Jets go 0-16, but I'm sure on every schedule rundown you've seen either me or Dave have a Jets loss for almost all of them. But I just think it's true. I think the Ravens are a far better team. They don't have all the controversies that the Jets have with Mark Sanchez or Geno Smith starting at quarterback, They don't have a solid, solidified guy at the running back position. Chris Ivory has some stints in New Orleans. He was in a packed backfield. And then Mike Goodson, who just seems to have some legal trouble, but you saw some stints of solid production in Carolina, but just not enough. You didn't see enough in order to get understanding of what he can be as a starting running back. So I just think the Ravens are going to win this game. I think the Ravens are going to go after Mark Sanchez or Geno Smith, attack them, Terrell Suggs and Alice Dumerville and Haloti Ngata. Just take out the run game, make them throw the football. Santonio Holmes is probably their only viable threat, even though I like the production of Stephen Hill coming along. So I think the Ravens will improve to 7-4. And I think also the key is just score enough points because the Jets' defense is pretty solid. I'm going to respect their secondary with Antonio Cromartie and D. Milner replacing Darrelle Revis, probably one of the best defensive players in the league. But as long as the Ravens score at least, I would say 20, 21 points, 3 touchdowns, I think they'll be fine. No worries. And improve to 7-4. So week 13, they're home against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Here's when it gets kind of questionable. I'm going to have them lose this game and have them split with the Steelers. And everyone's probably going to be saying, well, why do they win away and lose at home? It's not always about where you are in the NFL because it's the NFL and anything can happen. So, I mean, the Steelers lost in their own home. They know this is a huge game, and I think they're going to take it. So, I mean, it's tough. They're always defensive. And here in Baltimore last year, I mean, look at what happened last year. This is exactly what happened last year. The Ravens beat Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh, and the Steelers beat Baltimore in Baltimore with Charlie Batch, by the way. Keep that in mind. So I think the Ravens will drop to 7-5 heading into Week 14. I'm sorry, the Ravens will drop to 7-5. I don't know if I said the Steelers. So, I mean, against the Vikings here in Week 14, the key, I think, is obvious. It's Adrian Peterson versus Haloti Ngata and Chris Canty. Adrian Peterson's probably the best player in the NFL. He was voted on the top 100 as the best. The run game for the Vikings is unbelievable. They have a very good fullback, by the way, Marcus Felton, who made the Pro Bowl. Very solid. I give him props. But I think that with Greg Jennings, I don't think they have enough firepower. And they have Kyle Rudolph, but Christian Ponder has not really asserted himself yet in his third year. So I think that the Ravens are going to win this game if they can just contain Peterson, because it's tough. The Vikings have a lot of new pieces in place on defense. I think that this is one game that Joe Flacco might have to win, could win for them, as long as that offensive line, Michael Orr, protects him from Jared Allen, and they'll improve to 8-5. So week 15, they're away against the Detroit Lions. Calvin Johnson's the best receiver in the league. Matt Stafford is signing a new contract extension. He'll be in Detroit for a while. It's going to be fun to watch Reggie Bush, see what he can do this year. And I think that the Ravens secondary just got to focus on Calvin, but also watch Reggie Bush because he's a viable threat in the passing game. But I think defensively, Ray Rice versus Ndamukong Suh is going to be interesting as a watch. The Ravens are facing a lot of good run-stopping teams. Ray Rice and Bernard Pierce together are going to have to do a lot. So I think that in this game, I think they're going to have to find a way to be productive. Maybe get Ray Rice going in the screen game, as the Lions' secondary is very weak. I think this is a game that Torrey Smith and Jacoby Jones should shine. But I think they're going to lose this game. I think it's in Detroit. Detroit, I think, is going to be competing for a wild card spot, and I just think the Lions have more firepower on offense, and I think they'll win this game. And I think the Lions' defense has been vastly improved, and I think they'll eventually get a much needed stop at the end of the game. I think it's going to be very close. So the Ravens will drop to 8-6 going into Week 16. They face the Patriots and the Bengals left. Two playoff teams. The Patriots. This is a rematch of the AFC Championship game. But it's a very different team for both. Both of these teams have made vast changes, and I don't know if it's all because of their own doings, though. Aaron Hernandez for the Patriots, obviously, we all know what's going on with him. He's in jail, wanted for the murder of Odin Lloyd. I'm not going to put my input on that situation. Gronkowski is injured. Wes Welker's now in Denver. They have Danny Amendola. Brandon Lloyd's gone. A brand new offense. Stephen Ridley, though, is the one guy that I think the Ravens are going to have to take out here. Both, have done a lot. I think, obviously, you got to take out Tom Brady, but you can only contain Tom Brady so much. I think if you can take out Stephen Ridley and force the Patriots to pass the football, it's going to be interesting. This is the key. Arthur Brown or Matt Elam, whoever's covering the tight end versus Gronkowski. I think Arthur Brown's going to have a very impressive year this year. I think he's a steal in the second round. I think he's very underrated. Not many people are talking about him. I think they're going to lose this game, though, and drop to 8-7. I think it's because of this. Not many people are talking about how good that Patriots defense is. Everyone's talking about what does Tom Brady have to do in order to lead that team. Well, you know what? They have Brandon Spikes and Gerard Mayo, a great linebacking core, a young pass rusher in Chandler Jones. Vince Wilfork is probably one of the best run-stopping tackles. Again, this is going to be tough for Ray Rice. Their secondary is very solid. Kyle Arrington and Aqib Talib make a great corner duo. And then Devin McCourty and a very great pickup in free agency. Another underrated one is Adrian Wilson coming over from the Cardinals, a veteran hard-hitting safety. That's what's going to end up winning this game, I think, is that secondary is monstrous, and the Ravens do not have a lot of weapons. So it's going to be interesting to watch Gerard Mayo or Brandon Spikes versus Dennis Pitta. If they can take him out of the red zone, the Patriots are going to win this game. So Week 17, they're going to be 8-7 away against the Bengals. Now, honestly, this might be for the division, but we don't know what the Steelers are going to be doing. I mean, but this might be a win and you get in the playoffs. It might not just be a division. You got to win this to make the playoffs. It's away in Cincinnati, which is a tough matchup. Obviously, we all know Andy Dalton came up in the clutch. The Bengals defense did again against the Steelers last year in order to get that playoff spot ahead of them. I think the Ravens are going to win this game and go to 9-7. It's a clutch game. I think you pay Joe Flacco to win big games like this, and this is where he's going to have to come through, outbeat Andy Dalton and AJ Green, make Torrey Smith a viable deep threat option. The Bengals secondary is, I think, old. I mean, you have Terrence Newman, Nate Clements. I mean, some of these guys, Drake Kirkpatrick. I mean, we didn't see any of last year, so they're gonna win. They're gonna finish off their record at 9-7. We're gonna see how it all pans out in our playoff picture video after we're done with schedule rundowns to see if the Super Bowl defending champions make the playoffs. So they're gonna finish at 9-7. Obviously, you could argue they could be 10-6, 11-5. Arsenal, you could argue 8-8 and 7-9 because of how tough their schedule is. So that's going to do it. Thank you for joining me here on Get Real Football Experts Schedule Rundown, Baltimore Ravens edition. We wrap up the AFC North. Follow me at DiBi Sports Talk. Follow my partner in crime, Dave, at Dave Crest Sports. Check out my other Eagles blog. I interviewed Eagles offensive guard Julian Vandervelde at eaglesportstalk.blogspot.com for great articles there. Check out my co-host Dave's blog at realbillsnow.blogspot.com for a great Bills website, and also check out our articles at getrealfootball.com. That's why we're doing this podcast, for that website. And we'll be going away for a week or two. We'll be going away for 2 weeks, so the videos will be a little slow as not much is going on around in the NFL. But when training camp kicks up, we'll kick up, and so that's going to do it. Thanks, football fans. It's been real.